Hello, you're watching the John Nicholson YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I thought we might talk a bit about President Trump. Now, you'll know that President Trump has gone one stage further than ever before, and he's now castigating Europe and European leaders. He has embraced the far right in Europe. He's been racist for a long time, but he's now being openly racist about European countries. And there's now a gulf between an American president on the far right, the nationalistic far right, who seems to be a Russian agent, judging by the way in which he's talking about Ukraine and supporting Putin's takeover of a significant area in Ukraine, and has cut himself off completely from mainstream views in Europe. Where does that leave the United Kingdom? Well, the answer is it leaves the United Kingdom pretty isolated, doesn't it? Because we chose, well, England chose specifically, to pull out of the European Union at the very moment where we needed maximum solidarity with our European friends and neighbours. And we've seen that repeatedly with Sir Keir Starmer and the German Chancellor and the French President in an alliance, but a peculiar alliance because although they share the same views, the same worldviews about Ukraine and much else, the United Kingdom has chosen to be semi-detached. And not just that, not just on foreign policy, but on a host of domestic financial policies. We have discovered just how bad Brexit has been for the United Kingdom. I was just looking at the figures before I came to do this video, and our GDP has reduced by between 6 to 8% just because of Brexit. Real wages, you know that yourself, over the last decade, they've barely risen. Investment is 18% lower. These aren't my figures. These are the official figures and the figures of eminent economists who are united on these figures. Employment is 4% lower because of Brexit, and productivity is down to 4 or 5% or thereabouts. So how have our political leaders responded to the overwhelming evidence that Brexit has been a disaster? We know what the general public think because there's a significant majority in England now. There's always been a majority against Brexit in Scotland because we voted against it. But in England, there's a significant majority against Brexit. So how are our leaders taking forward the arguments for getting back into the European Union? Well, I'm afraid they're all united in cowardice. We've got the Tories, who of course are off the scale now, and they're talking about pulling us out of the European Court of Human Rights, which is set up largely by the UK and which has protected our rights since the 1940s and 50s when it was established. So we'll forget about the Tories because they're way outside the mainstream. Well, what about the Lib Dems? Well, Sir Ed Davey and the Lib Dems used to be a strongly pro-European party. Sir Ed Davey has said very clearly, and I quote him, he said that the Lib Dems are not a rejoin party. Just imagine that. The leader of the Lib Dems is saying that his party is not a rejoin party. Well, if they don't stand for that, what do they stand for? We know the Lib Dems are largely unprincipled on everything, but even for them, this is pretty significant. And as for Keir Starmer, we know that he was passionately pro-European. He now says that he doesn't want to see the UK rejoin the EU in his lifetime. Well, he's only 60, so assuming he lives another 30 years, that's a very long period for the UK to be crippled. Now, huge numbers of people who voted for Brexit, millions, have now died. Millions more young people who weren't of an age to vote when we had the referendum a decade ago, they're now of an age and they're passionately pro-European. What right do the Brexiter minority have to stop young people from their future, their entitlement to live and love and work throughout the European Union, the very advantages that my generation had. We don't have the right to stop them. And so it is abject cowardice for Keir Starmer and his cronies to say that they're going to do all they can to stop us rejoining. Wouldn't it be nice just for once for Sir Keir Starmer to show some courage and some leadership? Political leadership shouldn't be just about following the electorate, but leading the electorate. He is a huge majority in Parliament, and of course he should be pushing forward with this. And as for Scotland, we voted overwhelmingly against Brexit. You remember way back when we had a referendum and we were told if we stayed in the United Kingdom, we would lead the UK. Lead the UK, don't leave the UK. Well, that was the slogan. We were also told that it was a union of equals. Well, what does that mean? A union of equals surely means that one country in the UK can't dictate to the other countries in the UK. Well, Scotland voted against Brexit, and yet England dragged us out of the European Union against our will. I'm certain that when the history books are written and Scotland becomes independent and Northern Ireland rejoins the Irish Republic in a united Ireland, I'm sure that Brexit and the disregard shown for the smaller nations in the UK will be the catalyst that historians will write about. Well, that's the future for Scotland and for Ireland, and let's see what happens. But, you know, I've lived in England for much of my adult life. I really care about England and people in England. And it's the very poorest who suffered most because of Brexit. The disadvantaged communities, especially in the north of England, in the southwest of England and elsewhere, that received the greatest subsidies from the European Union, all those subsidies now gone, replaced with absolutely nothing from the United Kingdom, from Westminster in particular. These communities have suffered most from Brexit, and yet tragically many of them are going to go on and vote for Nigel Farage at the next election. We're in a real turning point where Keir Starmer has to show leadership and has to begin the process of rejoining the European Union, certainly the single market and the customs union, as soon as possible. Because if he waits until the next election, the moment will have passed. Nigel Farage, the architect of the Brexit disaster, will almost certainly be in 10 Downing Street, and England's downward spiral, both diplomatically and financially, will go on a very dangerous course. Please let me know your thoughts. You can add your comments below. I always want to hear from you. I love reading your comments, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, and please do subscribe. Thank you for watching.